In this podcast episode, Laila Cunningham, the Reform Party candidate for London mayor, shares her personal journey from professional sports to politics and discusses the profound changes and challenges London is facing today. The conversation spans London's escalating crime rates, policing failures, the impact of immigration, political disillusionment, and the broader social and economic issues affecting the city. Cunningham offers critical insights into how entrenched problems could be addressed and what reforms are necessary to restore faith in governance and public safety. Laila Cunningham opens by recounting her life story, highlighting her London upbringing, basketball career in California, and university experience in Cairo. Her competitive nature and experience with teamwork in basketball laid a foundation for her political career. Injuries ended her sports aspirations, motivating her to channel her drive into public service. Cunningham entered local politics due to frustration with rampant crime in her area and an evident disconnect between residents and the police. She actively worked to bridge this gap through community meetings and intelligence sharing, even confronting criminal elements herself. These actions solidified her reputation as a crime-fighting counselor and fueled her desire to seek broader change. Cunningham paints a grim picture of the crime epidemic engulfing London. Despite official claims that homicide rates have decreased, she stresses that other crimes, such as knife crime, robbery, and sexual offenses, have risen dramatically. An alarming fact she highlights is the extraordinarily low charge rate for offenses, only 6%, leaving most victims without justice. She describes how small business owners feel neglected due to police resource constraints, and how repeated offenses go unpunished, eroding public trust in law enforcement. She also condemns the failure of local authorities and the police to act against visible criminal activities, such as operating brothels or drug markets in residential areas, reflecting a systemic breakdown that leaves citizens vulnerable. Breaking down the causes behind London's policing woes, Cunningham acknowledges the severe budget cuts since 2008 and the damaging politicization of stop-and-search policies under Theresa May's tenure. She argues these decisions weakened frontline policing and stretched resources thin. At the same time, she holds London Mayor Sadiq Khan accountable since he controls police priorities and budgets. She criticizes Khan for focusing on identity politics, like hate crime units, rather than violent crime, which affects residents' everyday safety. Cunningham also proposes policy changes, such as allowing stop and search of individuals covering their faces in public to counteract anonymity used by criminals. The discussion turns to the complex relationship between drug addiction and crime. Cunningham explains that many minor offenders are driven by addiction, complicating prosecution and punishment. While drug addicts need rehabilitation and support, the current system often cycles them through ineffective probation and brief stints in prison, failing to address root causes. She emphasizes the need for long-term, intensive drug rehabilitation programs, even suggesting prison-based models where inmates cannot leave until they are clean. She calls for a pragmatic approach that targets drug dealers aggressively while supporting addicts' recovery to reduce petty crime and its ripple effects. Illegal immigration emerges as a significant concern in Cunningham's analysis of London's social landscape. She notes that London hosts the largest number of illegal migrants housed in hotels, many receiving government benefits despite entering the country unlawfully. This influx, she says, exacerbates housing shortages and displaces British workers from affordable accommodation. Cunningham criticizes government policies that prioritize foreigners, including refugees, over British nationals in social housing, describing it as unjust and fueling public resentment. She contends political leaders have been cowardly in addressing these issues, allowing division and undermining national identity. Cunningham expresses unease over the transformation of certain London neighborhoods, which she feels no longer resemble British cities, but have instead become culturally segmented or even dominated by specific ethnic or religious groups. She shares personal reflections on her Muslim family's experience, emphasizing that migrants come to London to live in Britain, not in isolated enclaves replicating their countries of origin. She highlights concerns about religious dress codes like the burqa, which complicate legal proceedings and public safety. advocating legal measures that enforce open identity in public settings. She warns that without a shared British identity, social cohesion deteriorates, leading to division and unrest. Cunningham critiques David Lammy's proposals to limit jury trials as a misguided attempt to clear court backlogs. She defends the jury system as a fundamental protection for citizens against state overreach and argues that expediency should never outweigh fairness and justice. She attributes case backlogs to structural changes that have unnecessarily complicated minor offenses, especially racially or religiously aggravated crimes. To resolve delays, she suggests extending court sittings to weekends and reallocating minor cases to magistrates' courts, rather than stripping away rights. On broader legal reforms, she opposes expanding identity politics at the expense of focusing on violent crime and public safety. The conversation turns to the rise of state control mechanisms under the current government, including digital ID plans, initially pitched for immigration enforcement, but potentially extending to benefit access and civil rights. Cunningham warns of a slippery slope where rights become conditional privileges based on compliance and government favor, threatening individual freedoms. She accuses the government of covertly expanding its power under the guise of public safety and administrative efficiency without democratic consent. She aligns these measures with broader socialist tendencies to nurture dependence on the state and to diminish personal and economic freedoms. Addressing economic issues, Cunningham highlights stagnant wages connected to the influx of cheap foreign labor and the disincentives to work created by welfare systems where benefits can exceed earnings. She urges a reduction in immigration to boost wages, deregulation to encourage business growth, and investment in skills training and technology to prepare the workforce for future industries like AI and data science. Cunningham laments government failure to support entrepreneurship and owns the narrative of Britain losing its industrial base, resulting in heavy imports from countries like China. The overall economic stagnation, she warns, risks bankrupting the country and deepening social divisions. Cunningham discusses the Reform Party's emergence as a genuine alternative to the established political parties, emphasizing its focus on British patriotism, law and order, and economic renewal. She credits Nigel Farage's strong leadership and consistency for uniting diverse members, including former Conservative MPs disillusioned with their party's direction. She acknowledges concerns about the influx of ex-Tory members, but insists that reform intends to enact real change rather than perpetuate the status quo. The party aims to unite Britons beyond traditional divides and rejects the perceived political cowardice that has plagued Westminster. The issue of migration again takes center stage with a focus on cultural integration and extremism. Cunningham points to failures to filter migrants who hold radical views or reject British values, resulting in communities alienated from broader society. She recalls the government's granting of asylum to figures linked to extremist organizations and criticizes political tolerance for this as dangerous. Cunningham connects these failures to wider challenges, including grooming scandals, where a lack of accountability and institutional cover-ups have shattered public confidence. She calls for tough immigration controls, prioritizing British citizens in access to resources and stronger enforcement of national security. A recurring theme throughout the discussion is the erosion of public trust caused by lack of accountability in politics, policing, and justice. Cunningham highlights instances such as police chiefs misleading the public, failure to prosecute criminal gangs, and ineffective political leadership. She demands a system where mistakes lead to tangible consequences, including losing jobs or facing prosecution. The absence of real accountability, she suggests, fuels cynicism and disengagement, further weakening democracy and social order. Restoring trust requires transparency, responsibility, and putting the interests of British citizens front and center. Cunningham closes by addressing the toxic social fragmentation in London and beyond, where identity politics segment communities into competing groups defined by religion, ethnicity, or lifestyle. She rejects this divide-and-conquer approach, advocating instead for unity under a shared London or British identity. By focusing on common values and mutual respect, she believes the city can overcome the divisions that have been exploited by political elites. This message of cohesion is central to her mayoral campaign and reflects a broad desire among Londoners for stability and inclusion, free from cultural and political tribalism.